Good to go.
Okay, so we are starting the June 21st EMO meeting. So I'm calling the meeting to order, and now I'm going to turn over to Chris.
Okay, so we're going to our first guest, I guess we got some business after this, but we're going to welcome Roger Collette. He's the Wildfire Prevention Officer with Natural Resources and Energy Development. I still call it DNR. He works with the New Brunswick Provincial Forest Fire Center in Fredericton. It's at the complex, the HJF complex at the top of Regent Street. You might recognize Roger from his media role at the fire center, and you certainly may have seen him during late May through that large fire period that we had. And I know, Roger, I saw you a lot. You were on TV and radio and just about everything for quite a period of time there. So.
Yep.
Roger's going to give us a presentation, and there's going to be some time for questions and discussion, and through that we'll hope to learn more about the Provincial Forest Fire Center and the DNR Fire Organization, and we want to learn how the DNR interacts with local fire departments in the case of a large fire, in this case our fire department here. But we'll talk a bit about fire prevention initiatives. That's Roger's expertise, although I know he gets involved in a whole ton of other things at the fire center. A bit on fire detection and fire reporting. Talk a bit about the resources that the province can provide if we get into a large fire here. Not only within the province, the resources that are available, but also through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, which Roger is quite familiar with. We'll talk a bit about some fire behavior and the realistic risk of large fire happening in the Hanwell area here, with consideration due to our forest type here, the seasonal patterns, the spring fire season, which is most concern, then post green up the summer and the fall, and then finally, we really want to know how we can help Roger if we get into a large fire situation like we saw in St. Andrews this year, how we can assist and how we can interact and through something like that. So I've explained a bit to Roger about the role of the Emergency Measures Committee. I should add that Roger is a long-term resident of our community, lives in Ward 5, so he's one of our own. So Roger, I welcome you as from the fire center as well as a community member, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Actually live right across the road from Lee Krause, so you know, I'm right. I look at him every morning. Well, his house anyway.
Well, I changed.
Yeah. And then from listening to, I think I need to ask for a raise because I didn't realize I knew that.
Oh, I know you did.
So yeah, as Chris said, I'm just gonna give you a kind of an overview of what the wildfire management does. I'll explain that a little bit. We are formerly known as the Forest Fire Management Branch. We just recently changed that, and I think I got a little piece on that in further on. So we'll just move ahead on that. So this is basically the breakdown, and to tell you the truth, I hate these things because they're really not pretty. But it's the easiest way to kind of explain things. So we have a branch director, and it's Troy Adams, and he's been there for about a year now. He was within the branch before. He was the operations supervisor, who is now Tony Cole, and Tony Cole worked out of the St. George district. He was the district ranger down there, came to us about 2 years ago maybe, and does the daily operations, so the fire center itself, where we do all the work that when there's fires and when we're moving people out of province and all this stuff, kind of all falls under Tony. Under Tony, we've got John Crane, who's our weather specialist. He's also our, well, he knows the history. He's been around for a while, so he really can, when we tap into what happened 20, 30 years ago, he can give us a lot of that. I call him the archives sometimes. So. And then there's a vacant casual weather tech. We used to have somebody that worked with John. Right now we kind of rotate in. Sometimes I'll go with him and somebody else or one of the mechanics or something like that. Maybe we'll go with him. Fire center admin, that is a seasonal position that would work in the fire center in the summertime. so that's vacant. And then we have Christine Babineau, who's there on a term right now, and she's working in the fire center as admin and also under the air operations part of it. So when we dispatch aircraft, she's the one that looks after all that stuff. And all the going-ons about it, you know, how many loads were dropped, how much retardant was used, and all that stuff kind of falls under her too. So then you have me, do some policy work, prevention, some communication, and now with FireSmart, I'm the provincial liaison, I guess. But we also brought in Joey Rogers, who works out of the Sussex district last winter to kind of look after the FireSmart stuff, because it's its own entity. Like we could probably keep 200 people going in that. I just don't have the time to really work at it like it should be. Air operations manager is vacant right now, but it kind of falls under Tony's tasks, so he's looking after that also. We have 4 air attack officers, so those are the guys that are in the directing the water bombers. So they are the ones who decide how we're going to attack a fire from the air. So they work directly for us, and the planes are actually contracted from Force Protection Limited, so FPL, who has aircraft. But we put our own air attack officer because they have all the fire experience and the knowledge. So, and under that, there's ground crew. They're the ones that keep the pumps working at all the reload bases, make sure there's, you know, the retardant in the tanks and anything that we would need. And those are scattered all over the province. I'll show a little bit about that too. Dan Michaud's our training coordinator. He is from Sackville, and he works with us, but he stations himself out of the Dieppe office because that's where he's from. He's been with us for 2 or 3 years now, and that's a big task. And that's where all of our personnel get all the basic firefighting training, and then right up into advanced. So I'll mention that a little bit as we go on. Matt Bruff is our fire equipment and maintenance specialist. So all the boats that we have, the trailers, the side-by-sides, four-wheelers, anything like that that we would use, comes into his maintenance shop, and that's where we have 3 mechanics. 2 of them are full-time here in Fredericton. One is a seasonal mechanic, and he also lives here on the Smith Road, the seasonal. And we have 2 more mechanics in Miramichi. One is year-round, and one is also a seasonal there. And they fall under Matt's supervision, so he also brings in any kind of equipment that we might need, hose, or even like the foam that our fire departments buy. They usually buy it from us because we have it on contract, and it's a better price than what you can get it for 2 or 3 barrels at a time. And then fire operations specialist is vacant right now. So we're looking, and I think it's going to change the title a little bit when we do get it, because we want somebody who's a little more science-based and GIS-based. So we're looking for somebody. That was a fire behavior specialist that we were using before, somebody who could predict how fire was going to cross the landscape and things like that. But we're actually looking for that, plus adding some stuff. We'd like to have a little more science and GIS in it. So basically, so operations, I was saying Tony Cole is our operations manager. So that's the old fire center. We rebuilt a new one, moved it down the hall from where it was, but that's basically what it is still. We're looking at a desk. There's one admin person who sits there, and the duty officer, and our duty officer rotates. So I just finished today my shift. So basically, we go from Wednesday to Wednesday as duty officer. So there's 3 of us that are in there full time, and then we do bring in help from some of the districts. A couple of guys will come in once or twice a year to kind of spell us off and give us, just so that we can, not almost every other week, doing the same thing. So we have media walls and screens that we can put up with a whole bunch of stuff. So when a lot of stuff is going on, that really helps. The little map in New Brunswick there is showing, I believe, all our weather stations. So we have 26 weather stations, I believe, across the province that are ours. And we also gather information from some of the other ones like Environment Canada and some other stations that we do around agriculture. We have some also. So we gather all that up, and that's what helps us determine the little chart on the side. It's all our fire conditions, basically, a lot of numbers, they don't probably mean anything to most people, but to us, we understand what that is. So that's the science side of it. And it helps us determine our burn map. So that's kind of all that stuff. And then we also have our fire weather index, and it'll show you a little bit more detail of what we're doing with our weather stations, and you can actually see a prediction out for 3 days right now. And so we can kind of see what's coming. So if you come around Thursday and you start looking at the weekend, do we have to have extra people around, things like that. So then you start making arrangements to say, hey, I know you're supposed to have the weekend off, but can you come to work? So that's kind of all that stuff that goes on there. So we support all the districts in the province when it comes to fire. So this is kind of a breakdown provincially. So we have 2 regions. We used to have 4, we used to have 5, we used to have, I don't know, now we're down to 2. East and west, and in each region there are 6 districts. There are 2 headquarter offices because we used to have 4 districts. We didn't eliminate any, so there used to be Edmundston, Bathurst, Miramichi, and Fredericton were the 4 districts, so they still have the headquarter offices there. There's roughly 150 full-time and seasonal forest rangers, so we get that question a lot. How many firefighters do we have in the department? Well, we're looking at somewhere between around 150. Depends on, some of them are casuals. You have vacant spots, people that are seconded to other jobs that you can't really fill them, but you can bring people in. So roughly around 150. We also hire 6 fire crews, so 24 students, and they're trained to fight fire. That's what they're here for. And they also work, we have 2 crews in Bathurst and 2 in Fredericton, and that's where our hose cleaning facilities are. So the one here is up at the nursery, up and behind there. So any hose that comes off of fire needs to be cleaned and tested. And so that's down there, and we also have one in Bathurst. So we have extra fire crews there because that's part of their duty. When there's no fires going on, that's what they're doing. So, among other things, like maintaining the sites around our weather stations, clearing the roads into those stations and stuff like that. But so this year they've been out fighting fires, which is what they want anyway when they get hired. So they've been out quite a bit. So, so I think there are 16 offices or 17 offices. So some districts have 2 offices. So the Fredericton district, for example, has one in Canterbury also. And so Sussex would have one in Hampton. So there's some places that have 2 offices. So our website, there's a lot of information there. It's all public. You can get information on current fires. So if you look here, it's a little bit small, but this is kind of the current activity, what's going on. Usually if there's a new fire that starts, there'll be a red dot show up on that map. And that's pretty close to current. And then as it goes on, it'll move to a different color depending on what stage of the fire. You can see we have our burning information up top, and then as you go down, there's some more information there about fire prevention and the stuff that comes up in our weather information. So there's all kinds of that going on there. It's not the prettiest site. Government doesn't like to make really nice sites, so we have to work with what we have. And we're going to probably start adding a little more information in there. One of the things that came up with the Low Quebec fire down in St. Andrews is that we don't really have, when there's a wildfire heading your way, what should you evacuate with? What should you do? So there's a few things that are different than evacuating from a flood or evacuating from, like making sure your windows are closed, right? So that embers aren't flying in. So it's just little things like that. So that's something when I get a chance that I'm going to look at and try to get that put up in there. So fire prevention, that's me. So as Chris mentioned, depending on what's going on. So we had a lot of fires. There's been a lot of news across the country about a lot of fires. And we had about a week or a week and a half there that we had pretty, high hazards and things like that. So there's a lot of media stuff that happens when that goes on, and pretty much nothing else happens for me, but it gets pretty busy. So we have some pamphlets that we put out, and that's all under the fire prevention. The actual burning information and all that stuff, even the burn line, technically falls under fire prevention. We do occasionally do trade shows, probably haven't done much in the last 4 or 5 years, as everybody knows. And our Smokey Bear costumes are getting a little ratty. Hoping to be able to replace them so you can look a little better when we use them. And so that's one of the projects I have coming up. And so we do, like I said, trade shows. We promote Fire Smart Canada somewhat. And then I'm also on a whole bunch of committees. At one point, I think I was on 9 different committees last winter. And one of them is the fire prevention officers here in New Brunswick. So that's like from all fire departments. So I'm on that committee also. And I think we met just 2 Saturdays ago. So under equipment and maintenance, I was saying like that's Matt Ruff, and these are kind of some of the things that we have and that we maintain. So there's 4-wheelers, boats, trailers, bear traps. So that all comes into his shop where the mechanics are working. If they need any repair, we have side-by-sides that we can use on fires. Well, not a lot of them, but we do have one that's a 6x6. All fire pumps come into us, so all our jack pumps that need repair and maintenance comes in. Fire trucks, we put all the new equipment on the new trucks that come in, so all the sirens, the lights, anything that, winches, anything that all comes into our shop brand new, and they install all that stuff. So at times they can be really busy. Air operations, so as I mentioned, Tony's looking after that right now. So we use 802 air tankers, which is this one right here. They're ground-based, so we have to land every time to reload them. And so we can use either foam, which is kind of basically what the fire trucks are use as a retardant, so it just basically looks like soap, or we can use long-term retardant. So most of the times when we dispatch the planes, the first thing we're going to bring is this long-term retardant. It doesn't dry up very quickly, and it'll slow the fire down depending on the fire. So that's generally our first load of our first round of that. We have 6 of these 802 air tankers available to us on contract every year. They also have 2 extras, and we did use them during the fire there down in St. Andrews. We also sent them to Nova Scotia in amongst all that, and so all 8 were working for that period of time. The smaller plane is our Bird Dog plane, so the air attack officer that I mentioned, we have 4 of, that's the plane they sit in. Those are being replaced. Can't get parts for them anymore, so they're basically crowing them off of other planes to keep things going. So, they're moving to a Cessna. I can't even remember the number. I think it's like a 204 or something like that. So it's a bigger plane, a little bit slower, but not much, but a lot more comfortable.
Roger, for those that don't know what a bird dog is, maybe you could explain that a little bit.
So a bird dog is, like I said, sorry about that. Yeah. It's the plane that kind of leads the water bombers. So before the water bombers drop, he's sized up the fire, and he decides, okay, we want to build a line of fire retardant along the edge of the fire. So he'll have the first plane go by and do his drop, and then he lines up all the other planes. So he may want to do 1 or 2 drops in a row, and then maybe move from a different angle, cut it off. But the fire retardant doesn't put the fire out. We lay it along the edge of the fire, so when the fire gets there, it stops. So that's the idea. Water bombers do not put out the fires. It's the people on the ground that put them out at the end. It'll stop it or slow it down. But so that's basically, and so the bird dog, as we call them, is the plane that leads the whole attack.
Can we ask questions during,
Sure.
or do you want us to wait
Yep,
till
absolutely.
So, what's the difference, like the retardant, like you just said, they go on the edge, but I mean, they do dump water.
They can.
Like, I mean, I've seen lots of pictures of the big buckets and
Yep.
they
So-
scoop it up out of lakes and whatever.
Yeah.
So, do they,
So
like, do it in tandem, or do they?
they can, depends on what you have. Like our planes don't scoop,
Oh, okay.
right? So we have to land to reload.
Okay.
If you're on a really big fire, water does nothing.
Okay.
It's might as well not go. But with the retardant, it's a little heavier, so it makes it to the ground. and it sticks, like, it really sticks to the stuff. Whereas the water will just drop to the ground and maybe start evaporating before it even hits the ground, right? So yeah, so that's what it does. And the reason it's red basically is so they can see where the last drop was, so they can keep the line going, right? It could be clear, it would do the same thing. You could just keep dropping it in the same place, you wouldn't know, right? So, yeah, so the bird dog officer, the air attack officer sits in that plane, and he just basically directs the water bombers where to drop the next drop. So the water bombers generally stack up in the air above the fire, and he brings them down one at a time as they're there. And then once you get, 2 or 3, as soon as they drop, they head back to reload. So eventually, you don't have them all in the stack all the time, depending on how far you have to go to reload. So we have bases all over the province. There's a couple that we don't use anymore. It's an older picture. Savogal is there, but I don't think I'd try to land there. There's rocks coming up through the pavement there now. St. John, we can use it, but we don't actually have a setup there anymore. We would be using Irving's setup if we went there. So we own Brockway, basically. The others are all, we're not using Moncton anymore. They don't really care to have us there, so we pulled our stuff out of there. There's such a busy airport, and then having our little planes coming in, 6 at a time. And so, but we can go to Chipman, which isn't very far away, and the planes travel quite fast now. The old TBMs, if any of you remember those, the World War II aircraft that we had, slower than, and I still maintain, I don't know why any of them survived the war, because you watch them flying. So, but anyway, we have these pretty much all over the province, so it's easy to, and we could probably get rid of a few more if we wanted to, because they're fast enough that we can reload them new ones too.
So Roger, just a point on where you day base those.
Yeah.
I guess you were mentioning to me the other day that you're now day basing, unless there's fire activity or anticipated fire activity, you're day basing out of Fredericton, which is good for Hanwell because we get air tankers beside us all the time.
Yeah, so they were in Miramichi up until 2 or 3 years ago. COVID kind of messed me up here, but we did move them in amongst all of that COVID period. So they used to be based out of Miramichi. They used to be based out of Dunphy, in closer to Dopetown area, but now they were in Miramichi, and now they moved them there, so they're based out of Fredericton. We can day base them elsewhere. We do still have access to the buildings in Miramichi, so if we think the hazard's more in the north, we can day base them. So we'll send them up at the start of their day, and they will sit there, and then they can go in the building where there's some air conditioning. We can do the same thing in Brockway if we want, but there's no building to sit in, so they're sitting on the tarmac in the sun. So we wouldn't do that from Fredericton because it's so close, but we can move them depending. So sometimes if we had a fire, say, if we wanted to, we could just tell them, hey, don't go too far, just land in Brockway and wait there, and we can do that too sometimes.
So how do you transport the red stuff? The retardant?
It is in a tank under.
No,
To get it to the.
to get it to the sites?
It's moved.
Because you had one in Nova Scotia, you moved some airplanes there,
So we move it in trucks.
big tanker trucks.
Well, either tanker trucks, or we can use, basically, we could use the same thing that they use for cleaning your septic tanks. Those trucks, they have a high pressure pump that'll suck the stuff into it. So, so that's what you need, because the retardant is heavy, right? It's a clay base, is what's in it.
You do the mixing at the site. You take the retardant down and then you can mix at a...
Yeah, so the retardant itself is not mixed.
Okay.
It's mixed, it's a slur, right?
Yeah.
And when we get it there, it's mixed with water.
So it becomes like 10 to 1 or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know what the ratio is, but yeah, we add water to it.
Yeah, okay, that's why you can have a lot of airplanes at one base.
Yeah, and so if, usually we know when the tanks are pretty empty, but if you don't, the retardant gets light colored, and then you know you're mostly water. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And do you ever get a chance, or do you ever get the offered that other airplanes like Irving's and stuff like that are used?
Irving always makes themselves available. The problem we have with Irving, and it's not a huge problem, but If they have a fire on their own property, they're gone. Like, we lose them, so we don't really rely on earning at all. Because if they have on their own private land, if they have a forest fire going, we're not gonna see them. So if we,
So did they help out in Nova Scotia,
no,
in Shelburne? Because they got property down there.
yep, they didn't go.
I didn't say that.
There's other reasons, and I'm not gonna get into that. So training, I mentioned, Danny shows our training coordinator. So he teaches everything from basic firefighting, which is just basically what the fire departments get, are emergency firefighting. So it's not quite the same level as this basic, it's kind of a step below that. This is what we give our student crews that come in, so they get a little more training on how fire is going to behave. So that doesn't really happen in the EFF training. It's more about the equipment that we're using, and so basically you're listening to our directions when we're on a fire. So this one gives you a little bit more. It's still basic though, but we can go all the way to advanced fire behavior. So for me to work where I am, I have to have advanced fire behavior. So I have to get a whole bunch of steps to get to that. And so, and then there's a whole bunch of things in between. There's things that I don't have, even though I'm where I'm at. I can't go out and be a division supervisor on a big fire out west or anywhere like that. So, because I didn't get that part of the training.
So, Roger, where's the backpacks?
The little
Yeah.
ones,
Do you still use those?
yeah, we still use them.
Is that a basic training then?
It's part of basic, yeah. Yeah, they're pretty, and they are basic. Like, they're not, you know, nobody really likes to run around with those things because they're heavy and you run out of water fairly quickly, and then unless you have a really close water source, you gotta go get some more water and come back. So it's more of a mop-up type thing. They work good on grass fires in the spring, because you can set it on a spray and you knock it down real quick, right? But to fight fire with those, you're more or less just doing mop-up. So you're looking for the embers that are still smoking in the ground, and then you just
squirt them.
soak them with that, yeah.
When I was a kid, they asked for volunteers in a fire outside Halifax.
Mhm.
So of course, my buddy and I said, well, we'll go. And we got the backpacks.
Yeah,
You know, and they said, go squirt it and you see.
yeah,
And we did it one full night, and then we said, we were home.
yeah,
There's enough of this.
yeah. So we're getting away from the big plastic tanks, and we're moving to rubber ones that are collapsible. So we're gonna try and replace and start building those. Sometimes we send equipment away, and I can talk about that a bit too, to other provinces.
But it
They
doesn't
don't
come
want
back.
the big clumsy plastic things, but they will take the rubber ones because you can pack them tight. And
Do
send
they
them.
keep them?
No, they come back. Unless they damage them, then they keep them and send some new ones, right? So one of the things, and the reason the helicopter's there, is in order to leave the province and work as a firefighter, so our student crews or any rangers that want to be out on the fire line, they have to do fit test, which is, it's a very difficult test. So basically you've got, I think it's 60 pounds on your back, a hose, and you gotta go up this ramp that's 4 feet high, up, down, you gotta do that like 50 times. And so it's, I forget how far it is in kilometers, but you've got like 14 minutes and 30 seconds to do this in. And then you're carrying the same thing as a fire pump, a Wajax pump, you have to carry that for a bit. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in that short period of time. So they fit test, and then once they pass the fit test, then they need to have hover exits. So when we move them out of the province, especially, most other provinces use a lot of helicopters to move people around. So you want to know how to, because they may not be able to land the helicopter, so you need to know how to climb out, let yourself hang, and let yourself drop. They don't want you to just open the door and jump out like you see on TV because the helicopter starts. So you want to really get a helicopter pilot mad at you, just try something like that. So there's a lot of, you know, things, how to hook up those big cargo nets underneath. That's all part of this Horizon training. So they need to pass that too, and usually everybody passes. There's not, that one's not as difficult because it's a full day thing. So, but they have to go through it or they can't go to province. So So, and in that resource exchange, and that's what Chris was saying, we're a member of the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, so CIFC as we call it. And we're also part of the Northeast Compact, so with the Northeast states, New England states, and the eastern provinces, so Quebec, PEI, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and us, and then a whole bunch of the New England states, Maine, Vermont, down to Connecticut, New York. They're all part of this compact. So we use them actually a lot for training. So they do get us a lot of training, and that's more up in the higher level courses. So that is a good group to be with. CIFC is more about interchanging resources. So moving people from one side of the country to the next, and where they need to go, what they're looking for, different things like that. So basically this is what our fire crews would look like. And yeah, they sleep in tents sometimes. And sometimes they're lucky and they've got some buildings that they're in. The crews that we have out right now are in Quebec. They spent one night in a tent and then they were in a hotel. They got lucky. Of course, they were near an evacuated town, so there was nobody in the hotel. So, but Quebec generally doesn't put you out on the ground. That was one thing nice about going to Quebec for mobilizations is generally you're inside. You go to Ontario, it's a different story. You're not even near these. You're out on the side of a lake somewhere. And they drop you off, and every 2 days they drop you a cooler of food. So, and Manitoba does that, and Saskatchewan. So it depends where you are. Some will work differently. If New Brunswick, we haven't had to do that, but if we did, we wouldn't be looking at putting them out on the line. They would be coming out. Whether we have to put them in a field in their tents, we might have to do that depending on what's going on, but we would try to find something for them other than on the side of a lake somewhere. So, and it can be quite big. You can see there's a whole bunch of little tents there, and then usually they'll have some of these trailers and stuff, and that's usually the overheads. So the people that are managing the fires, if there's any helicopter pilots staying there, they usually get the rooms. So everybody knows that before they sign up. So.
Now, this is a facetious type question, but do they dance and sing like that group that came over from?
That group that came over does, but we don't. Usually it's eat, get a shower, and just relax.
That was pretty impressive.
Math and everything.
Yeah, I don't think they do a lot of the dancing during the.
Oh, no, I know,
Day.
but it was impressive.
So it's the same thing, like I say, we normally just go out. So we send firefighters, we send IMTs, so incident management teams to help manage the fire. We'll send single resources, so it might be just a division supervisor that goes somewhere, or a strike team leader, or sometimes a mechanics. We will send mechanics sometimes because they need help fixing their pumps. New Brunswick, generally, we bring in aircraft resources is what we've been doing. That's the only thing I've ever had to bring in, so we can get these 415s, and these are skimmers. So if you see anything skimming in New Brunswick, it's going to probably be one of these. They're bigger. They can hold a lot more water. They can inject foam into it, so the same Class A foam that the fire departments are using into it, but they don't have the red retardant. They don't carry that at all. But in this case, this is on Grand Lake. They're swooping, and their turnaround for that fire would have like minutes, right? So there was only 2 of them, and if you were on the ground, you would have sworn there was a bunch of them. Right? So, but they're expensive. So we do bring them occasionally. This one's from Newfoundland. We brought that one in 2 years ago, I think, around the Bucktouche area. They came in and worked there. Sometimes if we know we're going to hit so with our fire weather analysis and stuff, and we know we're going to, if a fire breaks out, then we could be in trouble. We've done that before where we brought planes from Quebec or Newfoundland and just day based them here. Brought them down and set them on the ground in Miramichi actually, and waited. And then if a fire started, they were right there. So the last, no, not the last one, because we did bring these in from Newfoundland. But once we got them here, we kept them for a few days till the hazard started to go away. So.
Are they effective?
Yes.
More than the other airplanes?
Yeah, these ones are very effective. But
Even though they're water-based?
Yeah,
They just
But
carry so
they're
much
bigger.
more.
They're so much bigger, right?
Yeah.
And they can carry so much more water, so. And they come right down close and you don't want to be in front of one. It's like, it's hard, so. But yeah, they're quite effective because of their turnaround time. If there's a water source close by, they're back in. The first time I saw them working in New Brunswick was down near St. Stephen, and they were scooping off of Oak Bay. I thought there was 5 or 6 of them, there was only 2. Like they were just like, it seemed like every 30 seconds one was dropping. And so we get them generally as a quick strike, just get them to come, drop, and then leave. That's generally what we ask for. But if they have to stay, then it starts to cost a lot more money.
So what about the helicopters with the buckets?
We don't, those are only, they're really good for after the big part of the fire is over, and they're really good for getting people into areas that they're hard to get into, and they're good for using those buckets for hot spots. So, you know, you go in and you find a hot spot, sometimes a hot spot can be as big as this room, but it's just burning in the ground, right? So if you can get a helicopter in there, and it'll help you, especially if it's hard to get to. So in Beau-Quebec down in St. Andrews, it was very hilly, steep. It was just like being in mountains. It was like short mountains, like they were straight up, and they're hard to get to, no roads. So the helicopter, we used a helicopter down there, and he used his bucket to help put out the hot spots rather than trying to get equipment into there and stuff. So, and surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of water to be had. There's no ponds. There's no, like, everything was so steep that the little brooks would just. And they were just narrow little things down in a gully, so it was really hard. So in that case, we used a helicopter, but generally we don't use a lot of helicopters here. So when you're looking at a fire like this, and that was a few years ago, I think that's the Portobello fire. It was all grass, but it was in late October, right around Halloween, and it got real tall grass. Off in that, and water bombers happened to be in Fredericton. DND had brought them down, National Defense, because they had some fire on the base, and they weren't worried about the fire on the base, but it was making a lot of smoke, and they were getting a lot of complaints, so they brought them down to try and maybe knock the fire down there. They really didn't expect it to go anywhere because they have a big guard, and it was just smoldering, but it produced a lot of smoke. So they happened to be here, so we were able to use them. So seasonal fires, just again to give you an idea, the last couple of years, what things looked like. So in 2022 was a pretty quiet year for us. We had 214 fires, which is, I think our average tenure is, well, there it is there, 274. That's what average is. So we're well below that. We only burned 176 hectares. The fire we had in Beau-Quebec was 500. So one fire was already bigger than everything we had last year. 2021, a little bit, actually fewer fires, but we had a couple of, I think there were a couple of large grass fires. So when you get one grass fire that's 100 hectares, it doesn't take long, like it's just 200 acres, 250 acres roughly. So it doesn't take long to boost the numbers. And 2020 was a big year. That was the year we had the Savvies River fire. That was up near Blackville, Doketown, up in that area. It didn't affect homes or anything like that, so it was in the woods, but it was moving fast enough. It crossed the river twice, because it was a bend in the river, and it crossed it twice and burned 800 hectares roughly. And it was quite windy that day, so. And that was an 800 hectare fire, so you can see how that can quickly pad your numbers, right? So, and we had 462 fires that year, so we had a lot of fires that year. It was busy. That was the first year of COVID, and that was another challenge, was working with all that.
Yeah.
With the 462 fires that year, do you know how many were like lightning strikes versus stupid humans?
I could find it out, but I don't know.
Okay, but typically,
Typically, we only have maybe 5% of our fires are caused by lightning. The other ones will be caused by either
humans.
Well, or human activity. It could be power lines, it could be trains, it could be, you know, those happen every year too. Not somebody, you know, it's not somebody burning on a day they weren't supposed to all the time. Sometimes it's just, you know, a spark off of a rail, could be
Well, that's
anything.
what they think happened in Lytton, isn't it?
Yeah, that's, yeah. So like I said, our average is 274. This year we are at, I think it's around 182 so far. This year, and our numbers are up because of 2 fires. Other than that, we wouldn't be, well, most of our fires are like less than, like they're 0.1 hectare, so a quarter of an acre most. And that's only because that's the smallest number we can put in. A lot of them are just, you know, somebody was burning some brush in the spring and it started to get away, and it wouldn't be bigger than this room, but it's called, you know, it's an out of control fire and we have to put a size on it. And so 0.1 is the smallest we can put, so.
So do you get called out for that?
I don't.
Not you personally, but I mean your
Yeah.
department?
If
Or
it's
would it-
threatening, if it's threatening the forest, yeah,
So that would become part of that number?
yeah.
Even though Kingsclear might have thought King put it out?
So we pay for those fires, right? So we're responsible for all
pay for
forest,
them?
all forest fires,
Cost.
we're responsible for. Okay, so if it's threatening, so less than 60 meters from the forested land, which Hanwell is pretty much all within
Yeah.
forested land, right? So if a fire, if it's in the guy's backyard and it doesn't leave, we may not pay for that, because it's just,
So you mean you say you pay for it, you pay Kingsclear?
we pay the fire department.
If
So
they
it'll
were on
go,
call?
it will go, now it goes to the municipality because of the changes.
Yeah,
But
okay. So the option is there. I don't know if you recall, probably 10 years ago, on Route 2, out by Nevers Road, there was a fire. Allegedly caused by somebody burning in their backyard that got away. So there was a cost to fight that. Did you charge the landowner?
I don't know, to be honest.
Would you have?
We can. Generally, if it's accidental, which kind of, we don't. But there is a case down around St. George where they caught the guy lighting fires. He was caught and he's paying. He pays every year. He pays, because he can't pay it all at once, but every year he comes in and pays it. So it can be. So but generally, most of the fires aren't that we know about or know the cause or who did it. It was accidental most of the time. Might be stupid accidental, right? Oh, I can burn, I've had fires forever, I don't care about the burn on it,
I've
right?
done this before.
But, yeah, but there are arsonists, right? And if we catch those, they're definitely,
Okay, so if there's a fire and you have to get Charter's equipment company to come in and say, we need your bulldozer, you have the right to take that bulldozer, request it?
yeah,
Do you pay for that?
yeah.
So if the bulldozer got burned, you pay for the burning of, the fixing of that?
They're self-insured.
Yeah,
Well,
and it depends, right? Like if somebody shows up with a bulldozer that's ready to cab, you know, it's toast anyway, and then you see him driving it into the fire and then walking away from it, and it's like, oh, I think we know what you're doing here, but you know what I mean? Like, you have to know the circumstance.
I was in Nova Scotia in that big fire they had in Guysborough.
Yeah,
And I worked for DTI, and they came and took some of our bulldozers. Sure, you can have them, you know, great big things. The wind shifted. The guy got out and ran.
yeah.
The bulldozer burned, so they shipped it to our shop and said, fix it. I said, well, it's cheaper to get a new one. They said, I don't care, we don't have capital money, fix it. But that was a fight between the two departments, right? I mean, that wouldn't
And it's
be-
not to say there won't be some, you know, back and forth. We have fires where it's harvesting outfit, and there's a fire starts in their harvest area and burns all their wood that's on the ground. You know, we're probably not paying for that, right? So I mentioned Fire Smart earlier, and Joey Rogers is kind of our coordinator with that. He's also one of our air attack officers, so he's one of the guys that flies in the bird dog. So again, we are actually looking at hiring a full-time coordinator. And that's probably going to be a 3-year term. There's money coming from the federal government to We're hoping anyway, to help pay for things like that, help pay for upgrading equipment and things and stuff. So we're looking at a lot of stuff, and it's basically coming through Natural Resources Canada, and it's to help. And it's across the country. It's not just New Brunswick. All provinces and territories are involved in this, and there's millions of dollars that's being dumped into it. But it's all about preparing for what's coming in the future. So with all this climate change stuff and more intense fires and stuff, so we are trying to get signed on to that now. The wheels of government are slow, so but hoping that soon we'll be able to start accessing some of that money. And so with part of that, we'll probably bring in. We're also getting some provincial money with the climate change thing coming. So they're giving us some money, and we hear that this Fire Smart stuff. So Fire Smart is basically a mitigation to help you protect your own home. So what can I do to protect my home, right? So things like not having shrubs up against your house, not having mulch beds right up against your house. Those things are all things that light, right? So if you have a forest fire burning 2 kilometers away and the embers are flying into your yard and landing into the mulch catches fire, gets under your siding, your house catches fire. Gutters full of dead leaves, you fall into that and get under your roof. Open eaves, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do. Under your deck, most people have open areas under their deck. All the leaves collect underneath there in the fall, and then the spring, you haven't got them cleaned up yet, the fire comes through, it's right under your deck, and your deck are all made of wood, generally. So that's all. So it's all things you can do to kind of help protect your, and it's things you do yourself, right? It's things you can do there's other things like Fire Smart communities that you can get involved with, and so then it starts to, hey, let's get together and we'll have, all our everybody in your neighborhood will start doing some of these things. Maybe you get together and you might clean a green space up. So maybe, a park or something that's around your community, or maybe you'll get together and go help someone who can't do the work themselves. So there's things like that, and that's all things that are driven by people in the community. So it's not stuff that we're going to come and do for you. It's like we can guide you into it. So that's what this coordinating position, hoping, because I really don't have time to push that like it should. And right now, this is starting to gain some traction, and people are getting interested in it. And we just don't have the capacity to get it going right now. So it's almost like the cart's starting to fall ahead of us. And so we're trying to get some people in place to kind of look after that, and that would be their job, instead of sitting on the duty desk for 7 days and then doing a whole bunch of interviews for a week, and then like it's just, so that's kind of what it is. So we kind of came up with a bit of a plan. We do have now a Fire Smart committee, a provincial committee, so different people would sit on it. There'd be somebody from the Fire Chiefs Association sits on that. I think there's going to be someone from the prevention group sitting on there. There'll be somebody from EMO, Aboriginal Affairs, and a whole slew of different areas. And then so to try to get everything in place, and with that, it does give us a little more flexibility with using the Fire Smart brand, because we don't own that. It's a brand that's owned. Actually, it falls under the umbrella of CIFC now, the Canadian Interagency Fire Center, Forest Fire Center. So they own Fire Smart. So all this branding, you need permission to use it, and there's a whole, So there is actually a Fire Smart New Brunswick brand, but we can't use it until this committee gets established, and then we have some organization. This brand will be able to use it. We'd be able to set up things like websites maybe that are outside of the government, so that it's easier to put stuff up. Right now, everything we do has to be vetted through communications, right? So it takes time to get stuff up. So why are we not posting on Twitter, hey, we're on fire, whatever, in Quebec, and because it takes time to.
Roger, one thing, we know there's been a lot of houses sold lately, and there may be still more in the future. Maybe part of Fire Smart should be on the inspection program of all those inspectors, that they do a report on, have you accomplished
Yeah.
Or, you know, what are your issues, like you just mentioned, weaves under the thing.
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
they,
it
and
could
they get rated on it.
it could be that way, it could be that, you know.
Would be one way, not
With,
the only.
with us doing it, we may have, so we do have kind of some people that have a little bit of training out there right now within the department. But even if you had contractors where you could go there and actually do assessments for the
But
community.
contractors are already out there. When they do an appraisal of the
Yeah,
house.
yeah,
you
it
know,
could be, but they're not.
If you give them the material.
The problem is they would try to give advice, and they can't give advice because they don't understand fire
No,
behavior.
but they could give a report,
They could give
that
a
there's
report.
wood up against the house, that
Yeah.
there's this here, that's
Yeah,
here, you know.
so there's kind of and British Columbia is big into this, like they are leading the country in it right now. Alberta started it, they were the first, but British Columbia is leading right now, so they're really pushing a lot of this, and they're way more advanced than we'll ever get into this, right? But, so they're having some trouble with people going out and giving information, because you
Yeah.
inevitably start to give advice. So they wanna, so we're probably not gonna be able to do what they're doing. But, so it'll be more community-based stuff here. It's not to say that we can't, like what you're talking about, wouldn't happen. It could.
Or even your
They could be
brochure.
looking at building codes. There are already insurance companies looking at it, whereas if you're not a fire smart community, you're paying more for your insurance. There's some of that.
Landscape people?
Landscape people,
Okay, big one.
there's information on landscape plants, what you can use, what you can't use. Like, you go to my house and it's not fire smart, right? There's some things that I've done. I don't put mulch up against the house. I don't have softwood trees, so there's no cedar trees up against my house. There's no little mugo pines up against my house. There's none of that. But I have high bush blueberries up against my house, because they're not really flammable. They'll burn, but they're not like that fuel
But
charged.
the real question is, do they taste good?
They do. So, so yeah, there's a lot to fire smart. Like we can talk about this for hours, right? But, and it's coming. Like we're almost there, but we just need the people in place to do it. And really, so this weekend coming, I was asked to go to Simon's Fire Department for an open house. So I have somebody from the Hampton office going down there, because he has knowledge of fire smart, right? So we have some of those people out in the districts, but they're not detailed into it. So they can go and they'll be there and they can give a little bit of advice because they understand fire, right? So, and they know, so all this happens in what we call the urban interface, right? So where we are, where we live, right, in the woods. So that's kind of, so he's there, he's gonna be there, he'll understand some of that stuff. He might not have all the background, and even I don't have all the background for a lot of this stuff, so. So, and that's the other thing, like, so every year, Fire Smart Canada puts out these small grants, $500 grants for communities to apply for, and a lot of fire departments will apply for it, and then they can have an open house day, and they'll do a little bit of promotion for Fire Smart, or they can do community cleanups. So like I said, you get together and maybe you're gonna go work on a green space within the community, maybe hire a chipper, chip all the dead debris that's laying down, maybe, you know, prune up
Don't
some
put
trees.
it back as mulch.
Well, you can spread it in the woods, just don't put it up against your house. And so anyway, there's $500 that were awarded. I think there was, did I put the number down? There was well over 100 communities, or closer to 200 communities across Canada that were selected. We had 11 communities apply here in New Brunswick. 5 of them were selected. And so they get the $500 plus a $250 kit, so they send them some pamphlets, some booklets about Fire Smart. They send them a banner that they could put up, maybe some work gloves. Sometimes it's just a barbecue. They'll say, we're gonna have a barbecue, host a barbecue, and give out some information. They'll send them an apron for the barbecue and things like that. So just a few things, and it's about a value of $250. So that gets sent out, so. In the past, there were some other communities that got it, just as COVID hit, and so it took some of them like 2 years before they actually got it done. So like Miramichi's had it before, Riverview's had it. I can't think of some of the others, but, and this can only grow, right? So, and probably in the future, New Brunswick ourselves, we would maybe try to add some extra awards, right? So if we'd been maybe another year or 2 years down the road, all 11 communities would have gotten awarded, but we're just not there yet. We just don't have the funding yet. So, so that could be a little different next year, but next year we might have 30 communities apply, or, you know, it's not a lot of money really when you're doing stuff, but it's just, depends on what you want to do. So this is kind of what we're just talking about, the home ignition zone. There used to be 4 zones, they switched it back to 2 zones, or 3 zones, sorry. So the immediate zone here, up against the house, they're basically saying nothing, just gravel, right? So for the first 3 feet, 4 feet, nothing. And same thing where your outbuildings, so your sheds and your garages, you would treat them the same way all around your deck. Once you get into the intermediate zone, then you're probably looking at maybe a few shrubs and trees, but generally hardwoods would be more encouraged because they don't burn like softwoods do. They generally, as a matter of fact, if you've got a rip-roaring fire and it hits a hardwood stand, it usually stops. It usually kills it. So, and then as you move out to the next one, then you may have a little more of your softwood trees around. You keep your wood piles away from your buildings. People like to stack it under their deck. If you're on a fire department and you have to put one of those out, you figure it out quick. That's not a good place for it. And then we used to have another zone beyond the 30 meters. Most people don't own that property, so it's hard to do anything, right? So they kind of knocked that one out. But if you do own it, you can continue on. It's basically the same thing in that 10 to 30 meter zone. So I have some of those, and I'll leave them with you there before I leave. That's the same thing. Guess I was going to show it to you in a bigger one, so it would be easier to see. Some of the successes that we had in last year was that we automated the daily burn line. So every day at 2 o'clock it's updated, and whether burning is allowed or restricted or closed. And restricted is from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning you're allowed to burn. Closed is obviously closed, and open is open, but it's updated every day at 2 o'clock. When you called the burn line before last October, you heard my voice, or you heard someone else's voice, or someone else. So every day we did the recording, every day, in both French and English. That's automated now. So basically we get on our computer, we look it up, it tells us today is a good day, the whole province is green, generate, gone, it's done. So that makes it a lot easier because you had to have somebody that was available around all the time. So in the fall, that was me. So then, you know, if the weather tech guy said, hey, can you come with me today? Well, there's nobody else around that can do the recording, so I was stuck there just so I could be there at 2 o'clock to do the recording. So don't have to do that anymore. So that was one of the successes we had. There's a few other changes internally that are affected by the same automated system, but you wouldn't see that in the public. So, and our new wildfire coordination center. So basically, you saw a little picture of it before. It's basically the same type of layout. It's a little bit bigger. Our other fire center didn't have windows. We've moved down, we have windows now, so you can actually see. So we'd be sitting in there and we'd go, oh, it's supposed to rain today, and the phone would ring, and the guys down at the airport would be there, and the pilots would go, can we go home now? It's raining. Really? So we go out and look, yeah, I guess so, it's raining. So they don't fly in the rain, right? So so it was kind of nice, and just to be able to see outside and know that, you know, what's going on. So that made it's actually made quite a difference, because generally, even though we're in there for 7 straight days, my shift is a 10-day shift when I started. My first 2-3 days is just my normal duties, and then on Wednesday I started in there, and then you're there till the next Wednesday. So it is quite nice. It's not complete yet. You can see we got some paper on the wall. There's supposed to be 4 big screens there that are all together, so you can either have 4 separate screens or 1 big screen, so depending on what you want to do with it. Some other screens that are there, there's a smart board there that we can use that's interactive, touch screen and stuff. another one in the corner that's not active yet, but we want to keep things rolling on there, just like information like how much retardant is in this tank. This base has this much retardant. We have on our radio system, which is, you can't really see us behind the chair there, we also have 5 different fire channels that we can use that the fire departments have access to. So we will, so we put them on the board, say, there's a fire up at Kingsclear, whoever from the Fredericton office requested a fire channel so that everybody can work together. So it's like a mutual aid channel. They also have a couple of those that we can use too, but if you're there for a couple of days, generally you want to get on one of these fire channels, because then it's just within, it leaves the mutual aid channels available if the fire department has another kind of emergency that they might be search and rescue or something like that. So,
Roger, are you also on the provincial system? Yeah.
yeah, so we don't, well, actually we do hear some of the RCMP if we want to, but it's kind of, you got a lot going on because we're listening to all our regional offices and district offices, so you really don't want to listen to a lot of that stuff. We can actually, on some of the channels, we can link in with Nova Scotia and PEI now. So if there was some kind of a big event, we can work together that way. I think they were using one actually for the fires this spring or this summer, that when we had our planes going down there. So we could hear stuff on that. So that's, with the trunk radio system, that's some of the things that really helps us. That way, we used to have VHF radios. And the first year we had the trunk radios, somebody was digging a hole in Montreal and cut a wire and all the cell towers dropped.
Yeah.
Trunk radios were all gone. We still had our old radios, so we were able to still, we can't do that anymore, but we still had the other ones, so everybody still had everything in their trucks. And because at the time, there weren't enough towers in the province. It wasn't covered anyway. We still had to keep both radio systems going, because if you were out in the middle of the Christmas Mountains, you had no communications whatsoever. So anyway, so that kind of went on this winter. We also made a new fire cache, so we moved all our fire equipment that was in the garage with the mechanics out into another building. So all the fire equipment, extra hose, extra pumps, things like that are all stashed somewhere else. Gives the mechanics a little more room when they get a whole bunch of stuff in. So it's not sitting there and it's not getting this dusty from all the activities that the mechanics would be doing too. So, so that was done this winter too, and so there was a lot of stuff that went on last winter. The other success was, as I mentioned, we were forest fire management. Now we're wildfire management. Wildfire is more, most agencies across North America now use wildfire because it kind of brings in more than just forest, right? So we don't just do forest fires, we're now into the communities fighting the urban interface fires, grass fires, it's everything, right? So most agencies across Canada and a lot of them in the US don't use the word forest fire anymore, they use wildfire. And so we've changed our branding to wildfire management, and we also, this is our old crest, now we have new crest. So that's what we'll have on our, so if any of you see firefighters out about from DNR, we're going to start having this on our fire suits, on our Nomex fire suits, but they'll still be with the other patch, natural resources, day-to-day stuff, so their uniforms, except for us in the fire center. So my uniform will have that patch on it. So if you see any one of us walking around with this on our uniform, then you know we're in the fire center. And all crews that would mobilize, our students will be wearing this crest on their t-shirts and hats and stuff like that. So you'll see a lot more. This one is from 2001, so it's pretty much outdated. So we're able to do that also. So some questions. That's another small success that I had. We do grade 4 presentations, usually in the spring or over the winter. And we really never had anything to leave with the kids. So somebody suggested, well, even if we have some kind of a little calling card, today I met a forest ranger. So we put this together. the pictures, except for the trout, are all done by a local photographer, Ariel Merchant. She actually worked for our department. And so she took all these pictures here, and we were able to use those, and so kind of the baby animal type thing. So they were really successful and popular, and we've been using it for a few years now. So, but all to say is, even for your fire departments, you could, you know, just something similar, just a little calling card. It's kind of a collectible.
Just a couple of quick questions. One thing you didn't touch on that might be of interest to these people is the aerial detection program. I assume you still fly aerial detection.
Yeah.
So that's a, well, you can explain it,
Yeah.
but it's a way to detect fires, and certainly in remote areas and populated areas.
Yeah.
We have lots of people calling in, but anyway, you can explain that maybe.
Let's just bring up. So basically, like I said, all our planes are based out of here. So if we decide we're, you know, even if, say, last night a bunch of lightning went through the province, and we were worried about dry conditions and we're worried about maybe starts due to lightning, we'll send up a patrol. So if we know that the lightning strikes were kind of this area of the province, we can send a patrol up in just in that area. So it's basically the same plane that we use as our bird dog plane. And it's the same, generally, we can use our air attack officers, or we can use someone else that kind of works for us that knows what to do when they find a fire. So get the information where it's at. Okay, give us the fire intensity. What's going on? What's it burning in? Is it moving? Is it just burning in a clear cut? Is it, you know, what, all that kind of information? How big it is? So that stuff comes in from aerial detection. So we don't do it every day. When things start to get dry, we got some concern. And using our weather information, we kind of know where that is in the province. So we'll send the planes in that area. We're less concerned about the populated areas, because usually when a fire starts there, we know right away, right? So, but when you kind of get into this area over here, this area is, well, our weather guy calls it the titanium forest. It's a lot of hardwood there. It doesn't really, we don't have a lot of forest fires in the northwest. But, you know, depending on the time of the year, you kind of see the fires gradually shift north, right? So it starts spring fires in the south, and then it starts to move to the north, but they green up real fast. And then as summer goes on, we tend to have the bigger fires in this northern central area.
So you don't have fire towers anymore?
No, they're all flown. And then again, with the fire science, knowing what and when, right? So even though, right now, if a lightning storm went through, we wouldn't be really concerned about it too much. It's not to say that there wouldn't be a tree or two that might burn, but you're not going to get that big fire start and rip and roll like in Quebec, what happened. Now, when that happened here, it was June 1st. Quebec had over 100 fire starts all at once. We had 5 start, and they started immediately. They hit the ground, we were still fighting the fire in Quebec, and our planes were actually going to Nova Scotia, and we turned them, and they went and put out the fires while they were small, but they were detected almost right away. It's because we knew that the ground was dry enough at that point that it could start. A lot of times there's rain with it. It might take, and you know, it might not light the first day, but it might light 2 days later because it's been hiding in the ground or in a tree for 2 days, and then it kind of just smolders in there, and then the wind picks it up and then gets it going. So sometimes you might not be so much concerned to fly the day after. You might want to go the day after that, depending on your conditions. So that's what I was saying, like with the fire science and stuff that we know, like years ago, they just flew every day, right? They had planes and contract, you would remember that, right? And they would have they'd have a contract here and a contract here and a contract there, and those planes would fly every day. And, you know, like today is a useless day to fly. You're not going to find them.
But they'd be flying.
They'd be flying in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that we understand a lot better now than we did 30 years ago, right? And it's still growing, right? We're using drones now. We're going to use satellite technology, it's there now. And the technology is good enough that for, maybe not so much for New Brunswick, but like those big fires that are happening, they can watch them grow hour by hour on satellite, so they know where it's headed. When, all of a sudden you get a wind shift and it's going that way, it's being picked up. So, and a lot of provinces right now aren't even actioning some of the fires. They're way out in the woods, and they know they're there. They're not doing anything with it until it gets close to a community, and then they have to do something. So there's just not enough resources to fight all the fires. But here in New Brunswick, so far, we have roads pretty much everywhere now. It's hard not to get fairly close to a fire with the road systems, and we have our aircraft, and it's a small province, so it's a little bit easier for us.
So the last question I have, Roger, just to zero in on Hanwell a little bit, because we see what happened in Boca Back, but I think we have to have a better understanding here. Our forest composition here is pretty much a mixed forest across the landscape here.
Yep.
So a lot of deciduous. But having said that, there's times of the year when you do have to be very, like this time of year, it's hard for a fire to get rolling in this after green up. The science supports that, right?
Yeah, so it's quite different.
Quite different, but say in May, at the time when that fire was going, and certainly in mid-May in this area, we do have some subdivisions here that could be vulnerable in mid-May before we get to green up. That's when we should really be concerned around here.
Yeah, because basically it's the softwood trees that burn.
Yeah,
Humidity's not in the air at all, so our humidities, even today, are probably below 30%.
yeah.
So when you don't have a lot of humidity in the air, that's a good burning day.
Yeah.
But you need a lot of things to line up, right?
Well,
so in the springtime, as much as people think everything is wet, it's dry, right? Dead grass dries in an hour or two, right? So even though it rained last night, that dead grass is dead grass. There's no life in it, so it's available for fuel that afternoon, right?
Yeah.
So people will be going, yeah, but I'm walking on it and the water's coming out under my feet. Yeah, but the grass is above that water and it burns across the grass. And then it hits, whatever building. So if that long grass is right up to your shed burns. Maybe your shed has a gas can in it, it explodes and it throws some flame over to your deck, and then your deck's on fire, and then your house is on fire. So the springtime is the worst time of year, right? Because those fuels are there, dead leaves, dead grass. The softwood trees haven't sucked up a lot of water yet, so they're just like gas, right? Your hardwoods, doesn't really matter what time of year. When they have leaves in it, there's a lot more moisture around, so they really kill a fire then, but usually if you get a fire burning in softwood trees and it comes into a hardwood tree area, it drops to the ground. Then it has to burn what's on the ground, so if it's dead leaves, dead grass. So in the springtime, that's how it keeps moving. So if you were to have a fire here in the spring, probably what would happen, if it got up into the tree crowns, and you would really need a lot of wind too to do that. But the conditions do come around, right? It would burn across the softwood trees, hit where hardwood trees, and it's going to have to drop down, and it's going to have to burn on the ground to get across. And then, so when the Sabies River fire happened over in Blackville in 2020, that's what was happening, right? So it would burn across, and it would come either to a clear cut or a hardwood area, and it would drop to the ground. It was windy enough that it kept pushing it, and it would pop up the other side, and then get back up in the trees again, and go another little run. But that's basically what was happening there, and that was a spring fire.
Yeah.
So there would, those are the kind of risks that are here, but they're generally, there's generally more open spaces, even though you're in there's more roads, there's open fields around, and but it's not to say that it can't keep going, right? So communities are always at risk, no matter what. Especially if you get softwood in the area. But once green up comes, it's a different ball game. So right now we're in full green up, but we don't have high humidity, so the humidities are low. So basically what happened in Boca Back, it was green up down there too. but the humidity's dropped right out that day. That wasn't supposed to happen. That wasn't forecasted.
The
at all.
temperature was up in the 30s, humidity was down in the 20s, and the wind gusts were to 50. And it had been prolonged period of
Yeah.
dry.
So, and if you wanna look at that day, we had at least 15 fires that day started. And Beau Quebec's the only one that did that.
Yeah.
So the area made a difference too, right? So they're right on the coast, the winds are different there. Later in the day, the wind shifted. They said it right on the radio. They said the wind shifted. It helped them, right? It stopped it from advancing where it was going. Because the way it was headed, it was gonna burn a bunch of houses, and then it was gonna cross Route 1. And it was gonna cross Route 1, which is quite wide, 4-lane highway. But it was gonna cross it the way it was going. But the wind shifted, and then it turned it, started going a different way, and then it burned more or less on itself. So it kind of stopped it. And then nighttime, usually the wind died down, and then things are calm overnight, even though it was burning overnight there. So, yeah.
So what, this is the first I heard that deciduous trees don't really burn, like, or, I mean, they have to burn, they're wood, right?
They will burn,
Yeah.
but they won't carry a fire the same as a softwood tree. They'd have to be dead.
Okay,
You know,
so
so
like
they
the fire
will,
doesn't crawl
but it's-
up and over, is what you're
it's not
These, these fires you see out west and up north, and in Quebec, northern Quebec, they're coniferous forests. The landscape is
Yeah.
just continuous
Yeah,
coniferous
it's
forest.
all-
Right.
That
And
carries
even-
a fire.
Even at that, so if it hits a hardwood stand, it stops burning, right? So what they would have there is a lot of black spruce and poplar. So when it hits the poplar, it stops. And so right now where our firefighters, well, I guess they're finishing up there today.
So poplar is a good tree.
Yep.
In
I
that
always
respect.
treat them like garbage trees in my yard.
Yeah.
Continue to.
So anyway, that's kind of
Other reasons.
what's happened. You know, and I've seen that where, you know, I had a small fire I went to, and it was a thinning crew. So all the stuff they were cutting, it caught fire and it burned right across. And it hit a bunch of gray birch trees. Stopped.
Stops.
That's where it stopped.
Cedar tree.
Cedar will burn.
Yeah, that's what,
It's a good softwood for burning.
that's what's behind my
So
house.
anything with green needles or green that sticks around is a good fuel, but if you've got hardwoods mixed in, it's gonna slow it down for sure. And so where we are now, it's not gonna burn very good on the ground anymore, so if you've got a fire in the ground, softwood ground hits hardwood stand, drops to the ground, it's just gonna creep. There's nothing really to burn because there's a lot of green underneath now, all the plants and things are all growing, so it's quite different. And then if we can get, you know, maybe a couple more weeks and then humidities don't drop below 40 anymore, because, you know, your gardens start growing. And you can't sleep at night because it's too sticky.
Yeah.
So a couple questions. How much, approximately how much hose do you have?
Hose? It's several thousand.
1,000 feet?
100 feet
Length.
length.
So
Or 7,000
they're-
lengths?
They're 100 feet long.
Okay.
And we would have probably, in the province, I don't know how many thousands we would have.
Do you ever run out?
We haven't, but we could. We've actually sent 1,000 lengths to Alberta this year. Nova Scotia was looking for some, and I think we did send some down there too. So we have some here, we have some in Bathurst, we have some in every district office. So there's a couple of, so we have a cache, there's a cache in Island View, there'd be a cache in Miramichi too, and then each district office would have whatever, 100 to 200 lengths.
And volunteer fire department have them.
They have some, they don't have a lot.
And are they all interchangeable?
Yeah, well, we can interchange with all the fire department hose, but they generally would have maybe 10 lengths that are forestry hose. So ours are specific to forest.
So you got a different kind of connection.
Got
Yeah.
one.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
And now, you talked about the different airplanes and the different methods and the helicopters. And then there's person power fighting. What's the most effective? Like if you had $10 million, what would you spend it on?
10 million?
Yeah.
That's not much.
All right, 100, if you had 100 million.
Well, me personally, I would like to see the big water bombers, but they're $60 million each, I think, and you can't buy them. So,
Well, why can't you buy them?
they're not making them. So the ones you see there are 415s, they don't make them anymore. They're coming out with a 515, won't be out for another 3 or 4 years. And when they come out, you won't be able to buy one outside of Europe for years. So what we have here in Canada, and those skimmers, like those 415 water bombers from Quebec, and that's what we have. So what we bought were 802s, ground-based, and they're designed for it. You can put pontoons on them, and they can be skimmers. They're just not as big. We used to have one. We don't have it anymore. We were looking at getting some more. But again, they're, I think, I can't even remember, I think they're over $6 million each. And then you have to have the pilots that can fly them, right? So it's not just any pilot that's just gonna jump in and start skimming on the water, so. And we don't have full-time pilots. FPL, you know, they contract the pilots for the summer and then they go work elsewhere outside of that season. So there are a few from New Brunswick, but a lot of them are from other places, right? So they're here for the summer and then they're gone. So they're, you know, it's a specific.
Okay, so you talked about your weather stations.
Yeah.
I assume I don't want to assume, are you aware that Route 1 and Route 2 also have weather stations on them? Do you have access to those?
Depends. Some of the weather stations that are there are more just road monitoring. They wouldn't have all the, right, they wouldn't have all the equipment that's in.
Some of them are pretty
Some of them are.
sophisticated.
So we use a lot of them from Agriculture Canada, Environment Canada ones. We have a bunch of our own, but the thing is, we have airports also. That's the other one.
Yeah.
Which is probably Environment Canada, but the airport here in Fredericton is okay for information, but it's not forest information, right? It's in a great big wide open field. So our stations are in a smaller opening in the woods, and that's where we want to get our information. That tells us what's going on in the woods, right? So if you get one along the highway, then maybe the road's wet and there's spray, and so it depends on, so some of those things, you know, it's warmer along the highway, it's not necessarily what we're looking for. Now, not to say that some of them aren't close to the road, and we have some in some of the TMR sites, so the big, you know, towers, radio towers.
They also have access, they hire software or weather forecasting companies, taking all that data and putting it into a program as well, so that they can monitor the ice and snow and anything else on the highway.
So we gather that information from them too. So that's how we get our forecasted information.
Okay. I just, I'd like to see it used, I guess. If you need it, it's there.
We are drawing from a lot of stations, probably.
You're probably into those.
We probably have the best coverage for the size of our provinces anywhere in Canada right now.
Yeah, there's an awful lot
And
of stations
it's
out there.
all the latest equipment. We're upgrading it constantly. Right now we have, they're 30-foot towers, and right now we're climbing them and the only thing up there is the wind speed. And so now we're starting to convert them so that it's basically like a flagpole that drops down. So one guy can go by himself. You don't need two people there, because you don't have to climb anymore, right? And so that's kind of, and the equipment that's going in, the data loggers that are in there are new. They've all been upgraded, so we're continuously upgrading the weather system. So right now we have probably one of the best weather systems in the country,
Okay.
especially for the size of us.
When you started your presentation, you were going through the org chart, and there's an awful lot of vacancies. Is that normal? I mean, or did you have a lot of retirements?
Some were retirements. When we when we moved all the aircraft to Fredericton, we didn't need as many people because we're using some of the people that are here already, right? So our air operations went from 2 seasonal positions to 1 full-time position. So we have 1 less person that way. That's like what I'm saying, we had 1 vacancy in the admin type position. That's kind of where that comes from, sort of. But it's kind of things like that. The air operations or the air base manager, it was in Miramichi, so you kind of had to have somebody there. Now it's in Fredericton. Tony's looking after it. He's here in Fredericton. So there's kind of some things that are being, so he's kind of double duty. So that other air operation position, air base manager position is there vacant. So probably gonna reclass that as something else, right? It just, gotta work it out.
Because you've redone the organization.
Yeah, so we're just trying to figure it out, so that's what I'm saying, we want a science guy.
What do you
We
think?
may still have a fire behavior analyst, that's kind of above my pay grade to worry about that stuff, but I know that's kind of the things they're looking at. How we fill that, they still have to have a certain amount of training, you can't just, so
Oh, absolutely.
we want to look internally first. If we can't find it internally, we can go outside. New Brunswick's not one of the highest paying provinces in the country,
No.
so it's hard to recruit people from, say, Alberta or places like that, so it's kind of, but, you know, I think we can find people within our own, it's just depending on how we do it, right? Not everybody wants to move to Fredericton, so the person that might fit the job might live in Bathurst, and he's not willing to move, but if we can somehow work it out that maybe, well, you can stay in Bathurst, and that's what we're doing with our coordinator, fire training coordinator, right? He's from Sackville. He still lives in Sackville, he works out of the Moncton or Dieppe office. It works for him because he moves around anyway, so depending on the position, he has to go all over the province to do the training anyway, so it works. He's in Fredericton probably 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the week. So yeah, there's a few positions available, vacant, but there's some plans in the work, I think.
Okay.
Try and,
Because if the terrifying predictions happen, and they say, you know, like with the climate change and everything, that wildfires are gonna be more common, there's gonna be more of them. I mean, this is, you know, all sort of,
yeah.
Actually, the latest news is that wildfires are on the decline. That's a myth.
yeah, but I mean, they're predicting that in time, that these will increase. Do you feel like 150 full-time and seasonal forest rangers that fight fires is enough for this province with the amount of woods that we have?
Currently, yes,
Okay.
right, like right now, I mean, we have 60 people in Quebec, right? They wouldn't be there if we thought we
If
were,
you needed
But
the,
you're-
thought we needed them here.
They're supported too by all the volunteer
Yeah.
and municipal fire departments,
So
for
if there's
that
a,
matter.
that's the other thing, like, so right now, a fire starts in Yoho, right? Somebody calls 911. The first person that gets that call is the fire department.
right,
They're responding. They tell us about it. We're not on the 911 system. So
Right.
they tell us about it. They say there's a fire, Yoho Lake, you know, it's in the woods.
On the woods, yeah.
So and then we send. And then when we get there, we take over the fire. But we
Okay.
keep the fire departments there because that's our manpower, right? So,
okay.
so we don't, like, we can gather manpower from across the province, it's 150 people, right? So it's not burning everywhere, so we can start, and that's what we did in St. Andrews, right? After the first 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 days, they start releasing all the fire departments because they have a mandate that's not fighting fire in the woods, right? They still have to protect homes and stuff like that, right? So, and a lot of them have jobs, right? It's not their
Yes.
job, right?
Volunteers.
So they have to go back. So as soon as we can, we start to release them. And those that can stay, we'll hang on to them if we still need them. But then we can start to gather our own people. So like those 24 students, they're automatically, but they're scattered in the province, right? So we have 8 of them here in Fredericton that would have gone down there right away. But we brought the ones from Bathurst down, we brought the ones from Edmundston down, right? So they all ended up down there. And when we ship them out of province, they go out of province, right? So yeah, we have, and we used to only have 4 crews, right? So about 3 or 4 years
Now
ago,
we have
we
6.
increased it to 6 because we had, there's a lot more out-of-province work than there used to be. So having the students allows us to go help our neighbors, right? And we don't lose any money on that, right? It's all set up that, and so all our costs are more than paid for,
Right.
right? So we don't worry about that.
So like there's mutual aid agreements between all the provinces and,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so that's all set up, right? So if they ask us and say the crews are 20 packs, basically, so 20 firefighters. When they ask for 20 pack, we know what they want, right? And we send 1 or 2. Like right now, Quebec is asking for 30, 20 packs from across the country. I don't know where they're gonna get them because they're just not right there. So they're coming up from the States, they're coming from France, they're coming from South Africa, they're coming from, everywhere. And, we can do the same thing in the wintertime. We sent crews to Australia in 2020, right? So we do have agreements with, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico. There's one with Costa Rica. New Brunswick hasn't signed on yet, but there's South Africa. Did I mention them already? Anyway, and they're probably looking at more now because I don't think there was one with France. That must have been something special they did. So I think there might be somebody else, but I'm not thinking of it. So they're looking at, and they've had a relation with Costa Rica for a while, sending equipment down to them and stuff like that. And that's all SIFSI, like it's not New Brunswick, it's through the SIFSI. So that's what SIFSI does. They're the ones that, tomorrow we're sending one of our air attack officers to Northwest Territories, right? So he's gonna get in one of their planes and he's gonna help them during,
So now, Roger, what about private woodlots, like the major forest companies and such?
it's all still our responsibility.
It's still your responsibility?
Yeah.
Even though they, like you say, like some have their own
Yeah.
teams and whatever, but they supplement, they
It's still-
supplement you?
They can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so like all the forestry companies that work on Crown land,
Mm-hmm.
generally their silviculture crews, so their thinning crews and their planting crews will get the emergency, like the EFF training, the same training that fire departments have. And so we can tap into them also. So when you get away from communities, instead of fire departments, we're using them, right? So, and we do that, like when you get away, on the big licenses and stuff like that, Crown land.
And would most of the assistance that you get from the fire departments be from the more rural departments? Do you get the same type of service like from the city of Fredericton?
Yeah,
Yeah.
only more expensive.
Yeah.
The city of Fredericton is.
So we use our.
So we have rates that we pay out
Yeah.
to the rural, but the big cities like Fredericton, St. John, the professional fire departments,
Mhm.
they invoice us when we use them.
Career fire
Yeah,
departments.
so basically when we're using
Their own
them,
professionals.
we let them go first, right? Because it costs so much money, right? And they've even gone as far as trying to say, well, we had to bring in some people to backfill. No, we're not paying for that, right? But, that's all
That's your
stuff.
choice.
Yeah, that's all stuff that they looked at, right? But usually we release them fairly quickly, because,
Yeah.
so we do use a small, like out in Kingsclear is a really good fire department. They've been doing it for years. They get lots of training every spring. tons.
Sure do.
But a lot of them are like that, right? Like all the ones down in Charlotte County, they get a ton of fires down there too. So like there's a lot of them that are really good to work with. And then occasionally you have one that might not be as easy to work with, but
Thank you.
we work on those relations and try to make them better.
Just to pick up on your prevention message about evergreens versus the deciduous trees around the house, and you mentioned about like the perimeter within a few feet of the house and what you would have there for ground coverage and stuff. There was a situation I'm aware of 3 or 4 years ago out in Beaver Dam where the family had that black mulch along the deck on the front of that porch in the front of their house with lattice work down to the ground. Black mulch and some ornamental flowers or things around. And they were home, luckily, smelled smoke, and that black mulch had spontaneously combusted and had burnt the lattice work, but they called the fire department, New Maryland responded. By the time they got there, the lattice work had burnt and some of the deck had burnt and had to be replaced. If they had not been home, or had to rely on a neighbor to detect that or whatever, they could very well have lost their home. So I had that black mulch in some flower beds of my wife's along the front of the house.
No, her flower beds.
Her
not
flower
yours.
beds, not mine, they're right, hers. So I removed the black mulch, put landscape cloth down, I crushed rock over the top, the ornamental crushed rock over the top of it now. Like I have no more black mulch around the house. I would remove that.
I wonder if it started from something, another ignition source, because I've heard chip piles, for example,
Yeah.
will spontaneously combust, but I've never heard of, you know, a thin layer of black mulch
This wasn't a thin
spontaneously.
layer, it
I was
was,
gonna
it
say,
had some thickness to it.
it's pretty
And-
hefty.
And the fire department told them that that was not their first call
Really?
for that type of a fire, that they had seen it before. It was not new.
Yeah, probably if you talk to any fire department, they go to a lot of mulch
Yeah.
fires. And usually it's somebody flipped a cigarette into it, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions in the Fire Smart app.
Do you smoke?
I checked it out.
There are little things you can do yourself
Yeah,
to help
well,
yourself out. So you don't have to, it's not necessarily a forest fire, remember it's from that.
Yeah, that,
You can have things around your home that are fire hazards in and of themselves. So when you're looking at landscaping, if you're gonna use decorative mulch, you might wanna keep it away from any buildings or not, or use the decorative rock, or there's other products that might create a similar effect, but
Or just a thin skim.
I,
Lots of vegetation.
for me personally, after
Lots of
that,
vegetation.
I know the family, and after that scenario, I removed it from my property and replaced it with crushed rock or stone.
we don't use it at my place anymore. My wife complains about it a little bit because her flower garden's kind of not up against the house.
Yep.
So it's just, she used to use the red mulch and
I have some
she'd like
against
to
the
put some
house.
in. I said, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I have some against the house too.
It's just gonna go up the hill and to the neighbors anyway, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of things you can.
Well, in Handel, it's gonna go to your neighbors regardless, because we all have
Trees,
woods.
yeah, right.
We all have woods around us.
Very
Well,
few
I live on a
people.
side hill and it burns faster uphill,
Right.
and so that's what I said. I
Yeah.
said, it's behind the house, it's just gonna go up the hill.
There you go, I'm the same.
That's the problem, right? So, but yeah, you can definitely do a lot of stuff on your own.
Flat where you
um,
live.
Pretty flat around
difference.
that,
I think we touched on everything that I had
Yeah, I
mentioned
don't
before,
know
other than one
I
thing.
don't know if I told you anything about interacting with, how we interact with the fire
Well, if a
department.
big fire does start, and we,
Yeah.
the Emergency Operations Center sets up here, how can we help? I mean, who would we be, in that case, DNR takes over the fire,
Yeah.
and there'd be a lead person on that fire that
Yeah.
I guess we'd be
So,
communicating with,
If
and,
we want to use like the fire in Bocabec down in St. Andrews there for an example, basically the first day of the fire, it was the district that was running it, and right away, like within a couple hours, he asked for us to bring in an incident management team. So what we have are people, they're scattered all over the province, but we can bring them together, and they're gonna manage that fire. So there's an incident commander, he's top dog, or she. We only have one, so it's he right now. So he's gonna be in charge. And then under that, there's gonna be logistics, there's gonna be plans, there's gonna be a whole,
Communication.
finances even. And
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch of stuff under that. And in there is probably somewhere where your committee will fit, right? So probably, because you're gonna be either providing shelter, you're gonna be providing meals, you're gonna be providing like something, right? And so it's probably gonna be a little closer, maybe even with EMO,
yeah.
And it might be a smaller fire, and maybe we don't have all that going on. It could be just the Fredericton district shows up here, and there's 2 or 3 houses that we had to evacuate for possible, and maybe they need a place, right? So maybe you're gonna activate some place for them to be for the night, or for the, you know, for the 5 or 6 hours, or whatever it is, right? So
Yeah.
it might be something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
So-
kind of following like I was following the Shelburne fire almost daily, 3 or 4 times a day, because my immediate family was evacuated because it hit close to their communities. So, you know, shelters were set up, food was provided, the SPCA comes in. I mean, we were talking a week-long plus evacuation plus 5 or 6 days without power. So there was a lot, they just kind of mobilized together, and it all came together. They let the fire people deal with the fire, they dealt with the community.
Yeah.
And they were evacuated, not so much because the fire was close, they were in Shelburne County, they were in the Barrington area, but because the fire jumped the road and would have cut the community off, so that's why they immediately, like, you know, half-hour warning, get out.
Yeah, and it would have been similar, it would be the same thing here, right? So your committee would have a purpose for sure, somewhere, but like it would
But the
maybe not be,
connection would be
might not
to
be
our
directly to us, depending on the size of the fire or the size of the incident. Because EMO is gonna get involved too, right? So and then the Red Cross is gonna be involved, and then there's a whole, you know, but there's definitely gonna still be something in there somewhere. But, you know, so, yeah, you'll be
Even just communications to the community.
communications, yeah.
Because everybody will wonder every hour what's
Yeah.
going on.
They only got updates once a day, you know,
Yeah,
from Shelburne.
and so like in that case down there, St. Andrews stepped up, right? So they opened up there, because it really wasn't part of St. Andrews. Like,
Right.
they didn't have to,
No.
right? They didn't have to, but they did, because they had the facilities, so they opened up the rink
Yeah.
there, and they made room for
Shampoo,
people.
it was shampoo
Uh,
area.
They also had a lot of, you know, community members step up and donate stuff and do things. Cook's Aquaculture apparently, you know, they put in
Yeah.
a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
They were getting meals done by the college, so chefs basically were cooking meals for them. They said some of the meals they had down there was done with some of the firefighters. It was amazing, you know, but that's not normal, but it just, you know,
They
they
just
found,
picked a good
they
spot.
found, yeah, they found what was in the community and they were able to use it.
Yeah.
And not everybody evacuates to an evacuation center, like my mom and my brother, my uncle, my aunt, like I said, my whole immediate family. A lot of them were with church or friends or family,
Yes.
cousins. I don't think any of my immediate family actually had to go to an evacuation center because they could be evacuated to friends and things.
So sometimes we get used in other disasters too, like we've been called in to help with floods, we've been called in to help with ice storms, because we have the equipment, we have, you know, we have boats, we have wheelers, we have trucks, we have people, right? Not every, like EMO has some people, but they can't. Like if you're gonna put boots on the ground, if you need people out in the community, they don't have that, so they come to us a lot for stuff like that. Sometimes it works and doesn't work depending, because they don't necessarily use the same system we use, so they'll ask us to come as an incident management team, but then they really don't let us work as an incident management team. We kinda, so we're gonna have to, you know, it's a process, right? So we're working more now with trying to get EMO. There's been some changes at EMO now, so we might be able to kind of, so we use the ICS system, so it's Incident Command System, so there's a chain of command, right? And it's used all across North America, but EMO's not using it. They're using pieces of it, and it doesn't work if you only use pieces of it. So if we can get them to mesh it with us a little better.
And that's what
They're
the
still
fire
trying to figure out
department
where they
uses.
fit in forest fires, right? They don't really fit in forest fire because we run the fires, right? And so they're used to being here, and when it comes to a forest fire, they're not here. So they really, so we're actually, we had a meeting with them last week and just try to get better communications between the groups and where they fit, right? So they'll fit somewhere in that team, but it won't be like, it's an emergency, but even if they declare an emergency, it's still gonna be us after the fire, right? So,
The experts of the field.
So Roger, when you talk about 150 full-time seasonal forest rangers,
roughly.
are these the same people that would get me for fishing without a license? So they're a different group of people called.
They used to be, we used to all be, we probably had 180, 190 people at one time, right? So then they kind of just started splitting. So there was people who did enforcement, there was people who didn't do enforcement. We were all in the same department, all natural resources. And then they became conservation officers. So when they did that, they said that's all they do is enforcement. So they're gonna enforce fishing, hunting, if you're stealing wood off ground land, that's their job to enforce all that stuff. The rest of us were all resource, right? So we fight the fires and we pick up the dead deer and we deal with, you know, all of those kind of things, forest management and stuff like that. So, and then a few years after that, they took the conservation officers and moved them to public safety.
Okay.
So they're the ones driving around in the black trucks.
Do they have the guns?
They have the guns. And so they're all dressed in green,
Yeah, they go shooting up in
you know,
Kings Clear
big
there.
vests. Yeah, yeah, they have a shooting range up there.
Yeah, I
Actually
know.
there, yeah. So, so those guys are the ones that are gonna take your fishing rod from you. We'll just tell them about it.
We'll say, we were out checking out the forest fires and we
Yeah.
saw this guy fishing down there.
Yeah,
We
so-
know he hasn't got a
So if
license.
somebody's burning and we don't issue the tickets, it's the conservation officers that issue the tickets. So if somebody's burning, they're not supposed to, so.
So in order to burn, when the province is green or you're allowed to burn, do you need to get a permit?
No,
You just
you
have-
check.
You check.
You check, and if it says, like, you know, today's a green map,
Right.
and by county, so maybe York County's closed, right? So then Sunbury can burn, but you can't, so
Yep.
that kind of creates a little bit of a headache, because your neighbor is in Sunbury, and you
Yeah.
can burn, and you can't, so. So some places it's a little tough, and,
Yeah.
and so those ones, actually, when it comes up that way, we look at them pretty hard.
Right.
How close is it to being the same,
Yeah,
right? So maybe, in that case, maybe Sunbury will close.
right.
It just depends on how close they are.
You gotta draw the line somewhere.
Yeah. So, and we can control the whole thing, right? So
Yeah.
say there is a big incident, like during the floods, and all the fire departments are working on the floods and stuff like that, we'll just close the area.
Yeah.
Maybe it's raining, but it's
Right,
closed,
right.
because if there's a fire, who's responding,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So, like, you know, a few years ago, when everybody was out on Grand Lake and, you know, camps were floating away, and the fire department just didn't have time to
Yeah,
go put out somebody burning brush, right?
right.
So we can do that too, and we'll look at that too,
Yeah.
you know, there's stuff like that.
So if I wanna burn brush,
Just check the
just
line.
check online
You
and,
can either check online or call.
yeah,
We post it on Twitter every day. Also, I didn't put that up, but
Yeah.
we have a Twitter site and it's posted there every day. The
Yeah.
map's there every day. We don't have Facebook. You will see it sometimes on Facebook. Some of the fire departments will
Right.
post it. It's okay. I don't like Facebook because sometimes the images show up 2 days later
right,
and somebody thinks it's current
yeah.
and it's not. So,
I'll go to your site.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
And it doesn't make a difference if you're in a fireplace, right? If you have one of those circle fireplaces that get brick and steel all around it,
no, it doesn't.
if it says no burn on it, there's no burn in that outdoor fireplace.
If you have an enclosed fire pit with a chimney, so
Oh, okay,
basically,
those kind of things, yeah.
they'll qualify, you know, won't need it.
And what about propane?
Propane is good. I
Yeah,
actually
that's
encourage that, actually.
Yeah,
If,
that's what I
because
thought.
in 2020, we had, burning was closed most of the summer, right? It was very rarely open, and people would complain, hey, just get a, if you absolutely need to sit next to and if you're in a campground and you're using it, it's probably not any more expensive than buying a little bundle
Right.
of wood for $10 or
Right.
whatever it is now, right? And it doesn't burn, right? It just fizzles and
Yeah.
So
smokes.
that wood's getting very expensive.
Yeah, so propane is nice, you don't have the smoke in your eyes,
Yeah.
you can turn it off and go to bed,
Right.
right?
You can turn it on when you want it and turn it off when you wanna go to
Yeah,
bed.
usually no embers in there.
No, it's,
Yeah, so, and even, like, so if you get backpackers or outback hikers and people who say they're going fishing and they're gonna, because I get those calls too once in a while, well, I won't be able to check the line, there's no internet where I am, and I can't get cell service. Well, what did it look like when you left?
I was gonna check before you leave.
You know, and then most of those people, and my daughter likes backpacking. They don't cook on a fire, because it's not efficient.
No,
They've got the little things and you got water boiling in 2 or 3
Yeah.
minutes.
yeah.
Like, it's just,
And they're hungry.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, anyway, I probably taken up more than. a
Well,
lot of
yeah, I
time.
want to thank you, Roger. We got a much better understanding of wildfire management. We get that right.
Yeah,
That's
well,
a good name,
even
right?
I forgot.
And you're welcome back anytime. We just hope it's not during a fire.
Yes.
So, I'll just leave this with you guys, but I did bring.
They brought some badges for us.
No, but I do have that ignition home zone thing that I have on there, so there's a few of those that you can take. And we have fire smart pamphlets that I had done a few years ago. They're a little outdated now because it still has all the 4 zones instead of the 3. There's a little thing in the back here, it's just a home assessment type thing, gives you kind of a scorecard in the end, and it'll just kind of, might help point out some of the things in your yard.
Too much
Perfect.
knowledge.
One of them is roof. Here in New Brunswick, most people have shingled or steel
Asphalt
roof,
shingles, I
or steel,
Yeah.
but in some places, they still like the old cedar shakes,
Shingles,
shingles
yeah.
and stuff like that. Anyway, I'll leave a few of those. This here would probably is gonna be updated or changed to something else at some point here, but they're still valid for now.
Perfect. Thank you.
I can leave
So is
that.
that
Can add those,
$150
you can add
for
those
the
to
kit?
the,
They're in there.
What's that?
Is that the
Not a
kit
big
for
sheet, though.
$150?
No, the kit's way better.
that would be much
There's
cheaper.
gloves.
No apron, no.
Yeah, there's no apron here. So, anyway, there's,
enough. Okay.
and there's, I don't have any of the burn line pamphlets, I have a few. We've redone that, so it's the same information, but it's gonna look different. And I'm just waiting to get one more thing fixed on it, and then I'll print them, those will be available, so, you know, if you're having some, you know, fire departments will be able to access some of that. It's on our website. You can print it off from the
Perfect.
website if you want,
Okay.
and make copies of it, but it'll just explain more what category 1 burn is, so which is your regular campfires. Tells you what category 2 and 3 and 4 are, because there's 4 actual different types of burns that you need permits for. Category 1 is the only one that you get it verbally or online. The other ones you need a written permit, so if you're clearing a lot and you've got a pile the size of this room, you need a written permit for that one.
Right.
Okay.
And so then there's blueberry burning for the blueberry farmers, and there's, if you want to burn off grass, you have to do a big plan, and it's more complicated than, you might as well just not do it.
Good.
Right.
But, and that one also covers clearing of new agricultural land too, so. Anyway, those are,
You can go in and download the Fire Smart app on your
Yeah.
phone and do the home assessment, and it'll tell you what you should and shouldn't do.
Do you get a prize?
Pardon me?
Do you get a prize?
There wasn't a prize.
Okay. All right.
and that app is working again, it was not working for a while. So there is a new assessment, home assessment coming out from Fire Smart. They're in the process of upgrading that right now too, so.
Any idea when that new assessment will be out or available?
It shouldn't be too much longer. They upgraded the booklet, there's a little booklet too.
Yeah.
That's just been done, and I think we're going to pretty soon try to start printing them off
Perfect.
here, so we'll make them available.
Would it be available online?
The booklet, probably not.
Okay.
Because it's several, it's a booklet,
Okay.
it's not a pamphlet, it's a
Right.
booklet.
It's a book, yeah.
Yeah. I have to bring my mouse too, I'll probably be looking for that tomorrow.
Yep.
All right, thanks for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger.
That was very informative.
Yeah, it was very
Thank
good,
you.
very helpful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
Hope you get your 100 million.
Okay, so let's move on. The emergency plan. I don't know how much we're gonna get into this tonight because it's already 8.
Yeah, I can't stay much longer.
No, so I did all the updates that I could do based on what information was provided to me.
Yeah.
Chris has volunteered to make changes throughout. So if you guys can take this document, review it, make your changes, provide them to, this is true, right?
Yeah.
Provide them,
I'm not lying, right?
provide them to Chris. He will work on the document to make sure that we get all the changes implemented, and he'll do it in a different color, so we can see what's been added.
The revisions, yeah.
We'll bring it back to the July meeting, and that's all we're doing in the July meeting.
Yes.
It's just that.
Because I know I got your email with all the suggestions, but I
Yeah.
didn't have time to go into the plan and look at the suggestions.
Well, my thoughts have developed a little more since those first comments. I think I understand things a little bit better now.
Okay.
And I would say that I give credit to those that put that together originally, because they really did more or less follow. I think you were probably involved,
Yeah,
Chris,
she was.
and Mike probably, and Susan.
Well, no,
No.
Mike wasn't.
Mike wasn't with us back then.
But I mean,
Susan
it
was
does
mayor, she
follow
wasn't allowed
the-
in the committee meeting.
It really does follow the format that is,
Mhm.
you know, covered in the basic emergency management course. So I don't think we have to tear this down and you know, bastardize it really. I think we should keep it fairly similar, but there are some things in there I think they gotta be clarified and built on a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think I've got a pretty good handle on the body of it, but if you've got
Okay.
any comments, could you get them to me
Yeah.
sooner than later, like in the next few days if you can, because well, I mean, maybe there'll probably be opportunity after to tweak it, but
Like, this is going to always be a work in progress.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, I know.
It's a
just-
living document, it has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to, I'm gonna work on it in the next short while.
Okay.
I think Ross just says he even volunteered to help me a little bit
Did
on
Ross
some things.
volunteer? What a
Yeah.
sweet-
I stepped back.
I tell you where I think I just need a little guidance right now though, is the appendices. There's appendix 1 and appendix 2. They're very extensive.
And which ones are that?
Well, the first, appendix 1 is the resources that are available from surrounding area businesses.
Okay, you
I-
don't need
I-
to worry
I-
about that.
I think that's valuable, but it needs a ton of updating.
It's been in the process. Ken has called something like 75% of all the businesses. He
Okay.
hasn't quite finished it yet, and I reiterated to him yesterday that whatever was done,
Send it forward.
please send it in now.
Yeah.
So can we say that appendix 1 is being taken care of?
Well, yeah, and what's the two? I
The
can't-
second one is a list of all the businesses that are in the Hanwell area.
Yeah, no, he
To-
said,
To me, that, I'm not even sure what purpose that really serves, because I mean, it's not typical to have that in an emergency plan, if you look at the layout of a typical emergency plans.
right,
Like, they're not, I mean, there's everything from, you know, Greco to,
yes,
you name it, right?
right.
Hey, Mike,
It's-
that's-
You might just.
But is that,
fee.
does that really belong in an emergency plan? Because most of those businesses, they're not relevant to, I mean,
They're gonna change.
they're gonna change, it's a maintenance nightmare to begin with.
Yeah,
And,
well, we were trying to do it on a 2-year basis at the
but,
time.
but what
But, you
purpose does it really serve in an emergency plan?
Well, the Greco is you could order food
But,
immediately.
I mean, we all know that Greco's down the road, like, I mean, it's 7 pages of businesses.
Yeah, well, like I said, those 2 appendices, he's called most, or
Really?
75% of them all.
So,
And some of them, he was quite surprised, he told me that, now, I know I have called quite a few of them in the past, like years, you know, we're saying like 8, 10 years previous or whatever. And he said quite a few of the businesses hadn't had anyone call them in years, and some never had anyone call them, and they were quite interested to know that there was an EMO and that they were looking into this,
so can we assume that that's being taken care
Yes,
of? Appendix
yeah, I
1 or
think-
appendix 2?
yeah.
Okay, there's some businesses in Island View.
Yeah,
Or,
that need
well, I should
added.
say,
They need to be added.
The new, the King
Yes.
Clear LSD.
Of
right?
course, they need
Um,
all added to it.
I've got some of those, and maybe I can forward those to you again. I provided them about over a year ago.
Yeah, well, just make sure that she has them, and.
I'll copy
we
both
can-
of you.
And,
He's the
I'm gone,
master.
I'll be gone, so if you guys wanna work on this
He's gonna be
soon.
the master of that.
no, but I mean, it's, from experience, I'm just saying, Chris breaks his leg next month,
Oh,
and we
no, I'll be
can't get
fine.
him to come to meetings for 3 months. It's good that someone else
Yeah,
has a
well,
copy.
Yeah.
of
she can
what
be
you're
copied
doing.
in, but
Copy in
I'm gonna send those businesses to you.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna take care of appendix 1 and appendix 2.
Well, I'm trying to get Ken to get the information in here.
Yeah.
want him to get the 75%
Ken,
sent in,
Ken.
so that's
Ken, he was on the
finalized.
committee.
And
He's
just
not
work on
anymore.
the
He's been working
25,
on
but
it.
he's
Well,
kind of
can we
one of
count on
these nitpicking exact people that wants the
Can
whole
we count
list
on
done,
this,
you know?
You'll never get there.
I know.
Cause I'm on vacation starting, I won't be able to do anything,
Yeah.
I gotta do some things
No,
tonight,
no, it's
but,
just to document.
but I will message Ken when I get back.
Yeah,
I'll send Ken an email myself, and just ask him, please provide us with the information.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And I'm,
for it.
I'm kind of pushing his rear too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Every time I
So
see him,
what-
has he sent it, has he sent it, has he sent it?
Okay, if that's the case, I'm not gonna worry about
No,
appendix
don't
one
worry
and
about it.
appendix
No,
two.
ignore
No.
that.
Cause that's a big job,
It
that's,
is, and he's been working on it
Huge
for
job.
months.
okay.
Yeah, so we're not gonna worry about that.
So there is something else, as you know, I volunteered. If you wanna just hand mark this with your comments and everything else, just call me and I'll come and pick it up and then we can coordinate it in. So if you're not,
That
you know,
works.
if you're not comfortable changing a Word document, I'm certain,
That's
I did
That
that with
works,
mine,
yeah.
I sat down and
Yep.
hand wrote everything and all the comments and all the questions. You know, 'cause there are
Just
some
wanna go
questions.
over
You can,
Chris's
a lot
and
of,
And then Chris can.
lot-
then
some of these are
go
yellow
into
and
the
green.
Yeah.
Word document with a notification is
Okay.
changed.
Sounds
we have
good,
a
but it'll
question.
be next week for me before I can even look at it.
Okay, so feel free to give me a call.
as long as I don't have to worry about appendix one, appendix two,
No,
that
it's-
simplifies,
It's
Great.
looked after, ignore it, and I will bust his ass next door to get the stuff. That's fine, I don't care, Ken knows.
Okay, so if you're gonna call me, remember I'm married, so you gotta be discreet.
Oh darn.
Oh, okay, any more questions on this?
I just wanna know how long you're going for.
Can we talk about it after?
Can I carry your bags?
Okay, I'm
Okay.
going to, stop the
Adjourn.
meeting, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.